I want to go across to Indian American congressman from the House of Representatives, Democrat congressman, and part of the India caucus. Amy Bera is now joining us. Thank you very much, Mr. Amy Bera, Mr. Representative. I want to ask you, even as we speak, India has sent various multi-party delegations to different capitals. Some have gone to Europe, some will be coming to Washington, D.C. The idea is to try and impress upon global capitals India's point of view that when it comes to the operations against Pakistan and what India did through Operation Sindoor, why it had to launch it and what was the rationale for it and what it managed to achieve through it. But there is a degree of concern here in India, though, particularly in the manner in which President Trump went about announcing the ceasefire before these two countries could come out and announce it to the world. How would you speak to that concern?
I mean, I would start with obviously the terrorist attacks, cross-border attacks a month ago were heinous, and India did have to respond to that. Their territory was encroached upon. I think there was an appropriate response by India. Obviously there was a counter response by Pakistan, and I'm glad that both sides, and I think Secretary Rubio played a supporting role here to come to the table to find a ceasefire and to start negotiations. But at the end of this is really between India and Pakistan. I would hope that the United States plays a supporting role here, perhaps other countries. But it at the end of the day is a negotiation between India and Pakistan.
So one of the things, and since you've been a very close friend of India's, you've been part of the India caucus over the last many years, one of the things that India has been consciously trying to do over the last 2 decades or so, certainly, is to try and dehyphenate itself from Pakistan. In economic terms, India is a much bigger country. It's 10 times bigger economic size-wise, much bigger per capita, much bigger military, and so on and so forth. But aided in some part, I would say, by the United States and President Trump in particular, which wants to see India as a sort of counter in this part of the world to China. Do you think this episode, this last episode between India and Pakistan, has once again rehyphenated both of these countries, and not least, from what President Trump has been saying on social media and his comments, the U.S. role has brought a certain equanimity between India and Pakistan?
Yeah, they're not equals in the sense that we see India's growing role in the world. I've been a strong supporter of making India a permanent member of the UN Security Council. It certainly should reflect the 21st century. India is one of the fastest growing, if not the fastest growing economy in the world. It's a major partner with the United States in the Quad coalition, India, United States, Japan, and Australia. And India's role in the world will continue to grow. Pakistan, on the other hand, has real economic consequences, has climate change is impacting it. And then the domestic terror threats inside Pakistan can be destabilizing. So they're two countries on different trajectories.
So
and I would look at it from that perspective.
Okay, where does this then leave this whole equation here in the subcontinent? Because India has always believed that eventually, over the next 10, 20, 30 years, the great power competition is going to be between the United States and China, and India is going to be sort of firmly in the U.S. corner. But an equanimous approach now between India and Pakistan, does it not concern you that the long-term plan of trying to prop up India as a counterweight to China is somehow being derailed?
So again, I can only speak on behalf of the United States Congress and not for President Trump. From the congressional perspective, we see India's role growing in the world. So I would like to see India not boxed into South Asia, but actually be a major player at the table with the other major players in the world. So again, I do think India's long-term trajectory is to greater collaboration with the West, the United States, Europe, other democracies around the world. India obviously has concerns on its northern border with China. And what does that look like? China may take the approach to box India in. But again, I think it's in India's interest to continue to be a major player in the world. We will continue to encourage India to think beyond South Asia. There's things that we could do together in Africa, working together along with the Japanese and the Gulf states. So I think India's trajectory is one of a bigger role on the world stage. On the flip side, we do see China and Pakistan closer together, but the Chinese approach is generally a one-way street. What's in China's interest? And again, we do want to see a stable Pakistan. It's not in anyone's interest to see instability in a nuclear-armed country like Pakistan. So that's going to be a different approach.
But I do want to know your thoughts, though, on, for military planners, for example. This has been a bit of a confrontation, a scenario that they've been planning for decades now, where you have this active two-front confrontation that India's faced with. On the one side, you have Pakistan. On the other side, you have China. What we saw in this flare-up, this latest conflict, is that Pakistan was essentially using Chinese military equipment. So some would say that, look, the partnership is already seemingly at India's doorstep. What can the United States do to address that specific concern?
Sure. So, again, I would not read too much into President Trump's statements. I would look at, the statements that came out of Congress. I would also think about, in the first week of the Trump administration at the ministerial level, they did have a Quad meeting. Jay Shankar was here in the United States. I think there'll be a delegation of parliamentarians coming from India, and look forward to welcoming them. Again, the defense-to-defense relationship between India and the United States remains as strong as ever, and I think that will continue to grow. I think as we look to build our pharmaceutical industry, build new supply chains, I think you can see more of that moving from China into India. I think that will strengthen the partnership. I think Prime Minister Modi and President Trump have a good relationship from everything that I can see. And again, trade negotiations are ongoing. They'll take some time, but hopefully we will finally get a trade agreement bilaterally between the United States and India. So again, I think the trajectory is moving in the right direction. And then, we will see how talks between India and Pakistan go. I certainly think the United States has to play an important role here, a supportive role, but other countries like Japan, the Gulf states can also potentially play a supportive role.
One final word, Representative. I know you've been saying that you can't speak for the Trump administration, you can speak for Congress, but the U.S. president has been saying repeatedly, and he's been using trade in the context of India and Pakistan. And the problem and the concern here in India is you can't quite equate the two. Trade and terror are not quite the same, because India retaliated against Pakistan for a terror attack which killed innocent civilians, 26 civilians segregated by religion, and they were killed. To say, and for the President of the United States to say that, look, I said, let's trade, guys, and let's stop this war, trade and terror are not quite in the same league. So how would you speak to that concern?
Yeah, I wouldn't conflate the two issues. India was responding to a terror attack on its soil, and I think that was an appropriate response. I think trade negotiations are separate and they're different. So I would separate those two and have two very different conversations.
Okay. Representative Amy Bera, part of the India caucus in the United States Congress, thank you very much for speaking with us.
News18.com marches way ahead of the Times of India with 38% more users on native and social platforms. Network 18, the undisputed leader of news networks, way ahead of the Times.